Hey everyone. So we are live here on Facebook. So if you have a Facebook account, if you'd like to share on the UIC School of Theater and Music page, we do have it live there as well. And as we start getting some folks in, we'll just sit tight. And a couple more minutes and we'll begin our discussion. Joining us today is Jeffrey Gore, and moderating Richard Corley is here as well. So in a few minutes, we'll begin our discussion. And we'll just give it about 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll begin our discussion. Thanks again for joining us. All right, Rick, whenever you're ready.
All right, can everyone hear me and see me, I hope? I am Richard Corley. I'm a professor at the UIC School of Theater and Music, and I also had the enormous pleasure of directing this production of Love's Labor's Lost, and I can talk about the very fascinating process of putting this whole piece together in our pandemic world, partly rehearsed live in our theater and then filmed on various iPhones. But the first thing I want to do is to say that we're very fortunate to have as our guest today in this audience discussion Jeffrey Gore, who has joined us before for a discussion, I believe, of the Q Brothers adaptation of Julius Caesar called Rome, Sweet Rome. And Jeffrey is a faculty member in the English department at UIC. And His research focuses on class, religion, and education in the work of Renaissance writers such as William Shakespeare and John Milton. His courses at UIC cover topics ranging from Shakespeare to dystopian literature and film. And he's currently writing a book tentatively titled The Cunning of Pedagogical Reason, Class and Political Theology in John Milton's Educational Writings. And Jeffrey and I have had a lot of discussions about Love's Labor's Lost and the background to this play, what this play means, and how it relates to today. And the topics we're sort of going to focus on here are romance, especially romance in the world of the time Shakespeare wrote this play, wit, and loss. And again, with a special focus, I think, on bridging the divide between these periods of when the time was written and the time today when we're producing it. So welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So why don't we start off by sharing your thoughts about having seen this production. And I know you're someone who's taught this play and also thought a lot about this play and thought a great deal about Shakespeare and Shakespearean comedy. So anything you'd like to share in terms of the way this play works, the way you've been thinking about this play, and the way it might relate to our world today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I'll just start off by saying thank you very much. It is extremely great to be here. And also to say, what I mean, like to speak about the play and I mean, a kind of praise about the fact that you actually decided to put it on. I have often shied away from putting on the play because there are a lot of topical jokes or jokes that are kind of the 1590s within the play. And it was actually talking with you last spring when you began talking about, that this is really of this moment. And we were meeting at back when people met in person right before COVID hit. And we were sitting in the cafe at and you were saying, now think about all these things. And you really encouraged me. I am teaching it this spring. And I started looking at some of the things about it. The fact, I mean, now living in COVID, the fact that it begins with an issue of isolation, a self-imposed isolation by Navarre and his court, and that it ends with a situation of isolation where the princess and her court challenge Navarre and his court, is your love something that can last for the next year? Is it something to be trusted? Those are some of the initial things that I found out. But as I started digging in more deeply and looking at the play and trying to imagine how I would teach it, I use theater a lot in my classes, or at least I use videos of theater and films of Shakespeare's plays in the classes. And I started looking around, and I mean, props to you. This is one of the most ambitious presentations that I've seen in the last 12 months of this play. Other groups are putting it on as almost like staged readings, where it looks almost like what we're doing right now. It's a Zoom session version of the play. And yours is doing something really different. You're pushing a medium. And that's really exciting, to create a sense of people being together, which is part of it and part of the challenges of it. There's a lot more history backstories of this. And as we're kind of talking, I'll be happy to come back with some of this. But I don't want to give the backstory to the backstory to the backstory. But just to say that right now, this is the most impressive version of the play that I think it's the most ambitious version of the play that I think is available online. And you guys have a lot to be proud of for putting this.
Well, thank you so much. It's very kind of you to say. I mean, I think that what I'm most proud of with this work, this online version of the play, is that we were able to allow the play to really exist in a format that allowed the actors, the student actors, to really perform the play in a way that wasn't just talking heads on Zoom, right? So that, you know, you do get to see more of their bodies. You do get to see them embody the characters. We decided not to, for numerous reasons, we decided not to do costumes, but we do have sort of, we have the costume renderings at the beginning of the play. And the design backgrounds by a student designer, Elliot Michael, are quite stunning, I think, so that you can really get a sense of a kind of a picture book, a kind of a fairy tale. And I think what I like most about it is that there's a kind of separation of elements in a way where you can see these actors just in, you know, black t-shirts and jeans in a way performing this play, and you also get this fairy tale kind of background, and it does kind of exist in two worlds, which I think is always, I mean, for me, the thing I love as a director about doing classical theater is when it really exists as a kind of palimpsest, when you can see the layers one on top of the other, right? When you're not really trying to pretend that this is a play from our current world, or pretend that it, or let it stay in its world, but you're allowing the layers to be there and be something that we can all sort of see and think about. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I mean, being able to do that with Shakespeare is different than being able to do that with modern or contemporary theater. This is always something that when I'm introducing students to Shakespearean theater, and once in a while we get to go to a play, but like I was saying, I show video a lot, and they're always really interested to see that there's not this sense of realism like you get in most movies that you go to, or television or theater now. What you're going to see is characters on stage, very often a very kind of bare bones setting on stage, but the characters are also talking to people in the audience. Mm-hmm. There's not a constant adherence to realism. There is the sense that it is an event in the moment. It's exciting that we're here together, and the people reach out back and forth in it being something that's like realism, but also like a relationship with people. And so, you know, you have that as a possibility with a Shakespearean play. I mean, for anybody who has not seen it yet, it's really worth seeing. And I think that some of the things that you do that really push the medium are kind of interesting and important to, you know, the story as it's being told. The moments where it's just two people on stage, like your Armado and Moat, I mean, man, they are so good together. It's Christian Ortega is Armado, and is it Yortana Suleiman? Is that her name? Who is your Moat? I mean, outstanding. And I really enjoyed most, like I could tell that I was emotionally enjoying it most when it's just like the two of them on stage or on the screen. It's pushing the medium in the sense that we assume them to be acting, they're like that they're two people that are talking to each other. And yet, because of the medium that we have, they're looking at each other in the same way that all of us are here. But I was able, as I was watching them, to kind of imaginatively turn their heads and imagine myself that I was watching the two of them talking.
Mhm, mhm. That's
However,
very interesting. That's
yeah.
great. And another thing that I really am proud of with this production is that it looks like America. It really, there are people of color in many of the major roles of the play. It has the feeling of and of course they're all young people. And as you mentioned at the beginning, there's this sense that that these are young people who cannot connect to each other, cannot touch each other right now, right? The play is in a sense about that. The play is about, in particular, this imposed exile, men from women, and this need to reach out to each other, and the question of of when you're really ready to make that connection with someone, right? The men are just not mature enough to make that, to reach out and to actually be in a relationship with the women. The women are far ahead of them, as usually they are in the real world. And so by the end of the play, the men begin to catch up, but just begin to catch up. And the women say, okay, well, a year from now, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about one of the things that's interested me since you and I began to discuss the play is how, oh, look, one of the actors has joined. Oh, Richard Cantu has joined us. The King has joined us. The King of Navarre has joined us.
Nice to be here, Rick.
Hello, Richard. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Glad to have you on this call. I was just asking Jeffrey to talk a little bit about the time when Shakespeare wrote the play, and what time in his life he wrote the play, and what you think he was up to when he wrote this play. What was going through his mind writing this play? It's a very different kind of comedy than a lot of the other plays he wrote.
Yeah, well, so we assume that this play is written in 1596, which is basically the years of Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet. If you're a fan of the movie Shakespeare in Love, it's right then, okay? It's right then in Shakespeare's career where he's just about to take off. And if you watch that movie, there is something that's quite historically accurate, which is that the big playwright of his day is Christopher Marlowe. Well, so just a couple of years previous, Christopher Marlowe had written the play Massacre at Paris. And Massacre at Paris is about a French culture war. It is a historical play. It is about the actual St. Bartholomew's Day massacre that happened in Paris just days after the French Protestant king, historical king of Navarre, the real person that Richard Cantu's part Navarre is based on, the real Navarre was a Protestant in the mostly Catholic France. And there were forces that had gathered in Paris at the day of his wedding. And within 4 days, the forces of the Catholic League had massacred, had murdered 2,000 to 3,000 Protestant people. This is called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. And this was very much of interest to the English. The English, who were mostly Protestant, had hoped that France would be an ally in their own culture wars, their wars against the rest of Catholic Europe, their wars against Catholic people in their own country still. And they were hoping a Protestant Navarre would be on their side.
So this is fascinating. So when the first lines of the play are spoken by the King of Navarre, what is Shakespeare's audience thinking when they see this man?
So brave conquerors, as I know you are, I think that is the line, brave conquerors as you are, they were brave conquerors. Now, in the years before this play begins, Navarre and Dumaine, if you read Marlowe's play, Navarre and Dumaine are mortal enemies.
Hmm.
They were enemies. Dumaine was one of the leaders of the Catholic League that was opposed to the Protestant Navarre. He was one of the leaders in this massacre. So you can lay this, it's not so far away from what happened last Wednesday in Washington, D.C., where you had a legitimate political ceremony that was happening, and within days, mob violence breaks out. So that's happening in the 20 years before. So that happens historically. And then Navarre's life was in danger. So what did Navarre do? He went into protective isolation, gathered scholars and artists, and formed an academy. And so Navarre really isolated himself, not because he wanted to become, to gain greater fame, as the play begins off with claiming, but as a kind of, that the fame was a concession, and that the gaining of knowledge was a concession prize for the fact that he had to hide away to save his life.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, I mean, Love's Labor's Lost is a comedy. It's not dealing with these kind of political issues in a dramatic way, the way Shakespeare, direct way, the way that Shakespeare does in the history plays. But if I'm hearing you correctly, Shakespeare's audience would have been primed to distrust Navarre. They would have been primed to see his motives as questionable.
Yeah, that on the one hand, they held out hope, because the real Navarre does convert back to Catholicism, but they're a believer that this conversion, that he's actually still a Protestant at heart. So there's some English people that look to Navarre as a potential ally, that he's Protestant at heart, but he is Catholic enough to keep France together and potentially our enemy. But all that's based upon the same sort of very fragile ground that any oath is based upon. And so
so here, I'm glad you brought up this word oath.
Yeah.
The question of taking an oath and what an oath actually means is so important to the play, right? The way you make a promise to someone, or the way or more than that, an oath is said in the presence of God. This is something we talked a lot about in rehearsal. So they have made an oath at the beginning of the play. They very quickly begin to subvert that oath, the way many recusant Catholics would pretend to be Protestants, etc., so on. But an oath was something that people in Shakespeare's time and in Shakespeare's world took very seriously. But at the same time, there was a sense of possible distrust about this oath. So the women right away come and the oath gets broken. But at the same time, if you can break an oath that you've made to God, how can I trust what you say to me personally, right? So this idea of, can we trust someone who's an oath breaker?
Yeah. I mean, in case anybody here who's watching this has not, read the play or seen it in recent years, like the play begins with the King of Navarre, 3 gentlemen of his court. They get together, and for the possibility of devoting their lives to learning, they make an oath that for the next 3 years, they will sleep only 3 hours a night and avoid all company of women. Now, I mean, like, this is, by the second act, an oath that they are very likely to break for a couple of reasons. One, because they are, because the princess and her court are coming to Navarre to negotiate a political settlement and for the kingdom of Aquitaine. And they're going to negotiate this. How are they going to be able to do even their jobs if there is a group of women that they've made an oath against that are coming to negotiate with them? They can't not talk to women. But furthermore, this is a comedy that telescopes itself from, miles away. You can see that these four guys make an oath that they're not going to have company with women, and certainly not in any romantic way. Well, you can see where it's going, that of course they're going to break this. Well,
I told the cast it's like the Little Rascals He-Man
Women Haters Club.
the He-Man Woman Haters Club that Spanky and Alfalfa have, and immediately they can't keep.
Like one by one. So like this is something that I think it's an interesting and important thing that you do that actually challenges the medium. If you watch this on stage, it's always going to have, almost always, except for the very middle of the play, all four men are on stage together. Now, it's important for that historical background, really, that they become a group by making an oath. And that represents kind of what the unity of France itself. But it's also that they, by making this oath, they are there to monitor each other. They are there to help each other to keep the oath. And the oath makes them a unified group. But, like when you have, and so when you put the play on, it's very important that you have all four of them there. And then you have all four of them there. And then at times they meet all four of the princesses. And, then suddenly on your screen, which my screen is, I'm watching this on a laptop. It's tiny. You've got a group of four and a group of four that are on the screen. And that's necessary for the actual dramaturgy of what the play really is getting at, is the unity of those groups. But, so that they're communities of trust that are on the screen at the same time. But the only way that they can really fall in love is if they break their oaths and moments where they are by themselves. But how can you, that's your point earlier. Like if somebody has to break an oath to get together with you, how can you trust them? And so that's something that ends up, that's the richness of the comedy in the middle, is that each of the four men is going to find a way to either send a letter or poems, or to be able to connect some way with each of the four women. And then they all just decide all the oaths are off and let's just, be together as groups.
Yeah. Well, great. This is all great sort of background to the play, and I hope interesting to folks who are listening in. I'm so happy that we have Richard here, joining us. Richard Cantu, who played the King of Navarre, and Richard. I'm wondering if you would like to share anything with us about the challenge of this particular play for you as a young actor, and what what you experienced working on it, and what you came out of it with. What are your takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking me, Rick. And firstly, I just want to say that I'm just incredibly grateful for just being able to be a part of this this performance, and just having the experience was really wonderful for me. And anytime you work on a Shakespeare play as an actor, it's going to be challenging. You got to decipher the text. You got to understand the meaning. You really have to know everything you're saying with the intention and everything, and have it land on your scene partner, and then just receive all the energy that they're going to be throwing at you, But obviously we had an added complication, just, being on Zoom and everything too, But I feel like we all just came together and we really just held the space for each other and just did the best we could with the circumstance that we're in. But no, I had a whole lot of fun. And for me, I think my main challenge was just, not being there physically with my scene partners, just really wanting to be. But The rehearsal process was amazing. Just being able to have all of us in the theater while we were able to, I feel like that helped me out a whole lot when we actually started recording. And I feel like it all just came together in stages, just like any other show did. But, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, Richard. I just wanted to jump in and say, for those who don't know, and I could come back to you in just a moment. I just wanted to mention that the way we did this play at UIC, which of course is unusual and kind of a piece with what we're doing right now. Last fall, we began rehearsals in the theater. I really wanted to do some live rehearsals, so we were in the theater, but we were socially distanced. Everybody was wearing masks. We were, we were rehearsing this play in a way that was responsible, and I really felt that was important because, again, I really felt that the company needed to get the play in their bodies, and really needed to feel what it was like in the space to do Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not about the words. I always say it's about the embodiment of the words, about how the language of Shakespeare gets inside your body. And so we did, and then we then switched modes so that everybody, the actors had a green screen in their home apartments or dorm rooms or wherever they were, had a green screen. They had a tripod with an iPhone, and they were filming themselves individually as I was directing them by Zoom, and everybody was working separately. And we, of course, we would have to stop when there would, we would have some, a siren go by outside someone's apartment or whatever, but we had to start again.
I heard one cat.
Yeah, there was a cat. There was a cat later on. We tried to clean up all of that, but ultimately there are a few things snuck in. But how was Richard, can you speak to the transition or the experience of rehearsing in the room, going through the dramaturgical process in the room, and then getting up on your feet and working in the room, and then with the stage manager constantly calling out, 6 feet, 6 feet, everybody, and then moving and then transferring into this process where you were, filming in it looked like your bedroom at home.
Yeah, absolutely, Ricky. I mean, you just pretty much said what it was right there. So for me, it was super interesting because it was all about just taking this really large, very interactive experience and then just making it smaller gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because that's something I was kind of working on with Tanra. I was trying to talk about, how I can translate my theater training into film. And, she was just like, just make it smaller. And that's kind of what, we just had to do it. And again, there was the whole imagination aspect as well. I'm sitting in, my cramped little room, trying to make as much space as possible. But in my mind, it was almost like I was still on the main stage at UIC, and I just remembered all those experiences that we had while in rehearsal. And I just tried to create this world for myself. I tried to see the wide open field of Navarre and just, try to see the princess right in front of me and everything. And just, it really helped me just put myself in that world and just embody, the role of the king. And I had a lot of fun, even though I was still in my room in front of an iPhone, I still had a blast. So,
Imagery was so key, right?
Yes. Yes, the imagery is a major key.
Really seeing it. Yeah.
Well, can I ask Richard a question?
Oh, please.
Yeah, so I'm teaching this play this semester, and so you're the male lead. You were matchless Navarre. I mean, in some ways, like I mean, Navarre is kind of like John Kennedy in his learning and in the capacity that he has to be able to hold an audience. He becomes a unifier for his country. And he has this kind of regality that I think you really carried extremely well. I mean, everybody was wearing black, but you had this kind of strong looking puffy jacket that you're wearing.
Yeah.
Maintain this kind of cool look on your face.
Mhm.
Can you talk about your approach to Navarre? Like, how do you see him? And how did that affect, you know, the way that you wanted to embody this character?
Yeah. Well, Jeffrey, first of all, that's very high praise. So thank you. The King of Navarre thanks you.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a lot of fun when you go and you put on this play, because it is a lot of fun. You know, it's a blast to perform. So for me, when it comes to the King of Navarre, it's his nobility for me. Like, he's very much a king in every sense of the word. And for me, I tried to just imagine what this guy, because anybody who's going to make an oath, you know, and take it that seriously, you know, like, it just speaks volumes to who they are as a person and their character. So I tried to maintain that nobility at all times, but it's also an integration of not just nobility, but fun. Like, the king is fun at his heart. You know, he's just like, something Rick really helped me find is just the lightness in the character. And you know, like, he's confident, he's smooth, he's fun, but he also has this weight to him in the sense of, like, you know, he made an oath and he's really not trying to break it, you know, but you know, he gets to the point where he it's almost beyond his control, you know. It's just he gets his feelings caught up in, you know, the princess, and it is what it is. But he has to make that decision for himself. Is it worth it? Is this oath still worth it? And, you know, then with Barone smooth talking, you know, they just decide, you know, it's not, you know, forget the oath, you know, we're going to go for these girls. But yeah, you know, that's really what it is for me.
Yeah,
That's
well,
great.
I love watching you and the Barone. Is Avery, is that his name? Avery Fountain?
Yes, Avery
Yeah,
Fountain.
yeah. So the two of you are so good together because, I mean, Navarre is really the king. Navarre is he's the believer in the oath. He's the proponent of the oath. And Barone is the skeptic of the oath. You know, at the beginning, he says, you know, I don't want to do this. And he's arguing, we don't need to have the oath. We can just study. That will be fine. And Navarre says to him, well, go home, Barone. Adieu, you know. And then Barone comes back and says, please, please let me be a part of this. So, like, how was that dynamic of being, you know, the serious one?
Yeah, no. Jeffrey, I'll tell you, again, like, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time. Avery, he's a great guy in real life, and you know, he's a close friend of mine. And like you were saying, that dynamic, I think that kind of shows on, well, on stage, on Zoom or whatever, as well. But something kind of Rick, you know, again, you know, he just sat me down, and when I was first cast as the king, you know, I called Rick, and you know, I just had to talk to him about the character, and he told me, he's just like, Richard, the way you gotta look at it is, you're Michael Jordan and he's Scottie Pippen. And I'm just like, oh, snap, you know, it all makes sense now. Like, it all is really just coming together for me. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, like, what about, okay, so you've got Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, but you've also got
Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman. You've got lots of clowns.
Yeah, yeah.
And the clowns are so good.
Mhm.
You know, like, so, like, the clown, I mean, you guys had, I mean, like, you guys had the most speaking parts, and you know, you pulled off playing the seriousness and the earnestness. Like, you guys
Yes.
sincerely believe what you are.
Even in Russian beards and fake beards and fake accents, right?
That was a good time.
Now, can somebody talk about some of the clowns, like the Moat character, the Costard character, potentially the Armato character, because they are on the, they're not earnest, since they're not citizens in the, or they're not part of the ruling class of the play.
Right. Well, you know, Moth or Moat, who is the servant to the boy servant to Armato, This is really fascinating, and I think, you know, generally when this play is done, Armado is played by a much older actor. He's a sort of he's played oftentimes as this sort of Don Quixote-esque kind of knight errant who really is a kind of romantic figure, but a figure of comic romance, right? And I think Christian played had a great deal of fun with that character, and Yortana playing Moth. It's you know, one of the things we had to figure out was that these servants, you know, are in this bind because servants want to please their master. But when their master turns out to be a fool, which is often the way that the mechanism of Shakespearean and Shakespearean comedy and Moliere comedy. Well, look at that. There's Christian. There he is.
Speak of the devil.
I just happened to be talking about Armado, and there he appears. There he
Very
pops
much
up.
so, yeah.
Well, Christian, let me just finish saying what I was saying about Armado and Moth. And then you jump in here and talk about Armado. I was just saying that Armado is this incredibly romantic character. He believes in love, and yet at the same time he's never felt this way about someone, and he happens to fall in love with a milkmaid. And that's incredibly confusing to him, right? Shakespeare's so wonderful about the idea that we fall in love with the wrong people, and it's incredibly confusing to us when it happens. And then we have to kind of sort through in our psyche this sense of I'm not supposed to be in love with this kind of person, and yet I am. So what am I going to do about it? And Armado has this servant, this boy, Moth, who he sort of leans upon to explain this whole thing to him, right, Christian? So can you talk about your experience of playing this character? What were the challenges? How did you come to understand this guy? And it's an amazing character and very difficult, and you just did such a beautiful job with it. So there you are.
Well, thank you, Rick. Hello, Jeffrey, Leah, Tanara, Guillermo. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, that was, you know what? I think one of the first clues that I got to really playing this character was just in the title description. It said, Don Adriano de Armado, a fantastical Spaniard. And I said to myself, okay, well, what are things that are fantastical? And immediately my head said Disneyland, and my hand did this. And Rick might tell you, I came in with this really big idea what this character might be, and how do I play fantastical, first and foremost? How do I embody this fantasticalness? And I think between this this challenge of being fantastical and being kind of whimsical and in love, right? Especially with somebody that's a forbidden love, right? This kind of common person, right? I think of myself as more of a high status. There's just that duality. And I think if I look in life, right, like we might fall in love with people we probably thought we shouldn't have, and, you know, it happens, you know? So, I mean, really drawing from what the text gave me. And I think really just having Rick too. Rick is a really great person to just shape, you know, what's happening, breaking down basic things like what is the text saying, what it's given first, and then building it from there, and then shaping it with whatever I can bring in of myself was really how I got to where we saw in the play.
Wonderful, wonderful description. I wanted to, I know that the clock is ticking here, and I don't want to keep folks past more than an hour or so. So I wanted to ask if any of the folks here who've seen the play want to talk about it or want to join in. Rose is joining us. She was a part of the production as well. But anyone who'd like to talk about their experience of having seen the production, or any questions that you have for myself, for Jeffrey, some of the cast who are here, anyone you'd like to speak to, any questions that you have. And I think Guillermo would tell me that you can put them in the chat too.
Oh, I'd like to add too that you know what? Whenever Don Amato's not on stage, somebody's saying something about him. so,
Very true.
Oh,
Very
yes, and we,
His ears are always itching.
yes, and we added you into some parts. We added you in whenever, there's several times when they read a letter from Don Armato, and we put Don Armato into those parts, right? So he came on screen to do his own letters oftentimes.
Well, can I just ask Christian? I mean, like, if anyone else has a question, I don't want to interrupt, but as well, you know, I'm just thinking about our time, and it's so interesting having you here. I'm teaching the play this semester, and for me, I'm coming back to it for the first time in about 8 years or so. I always shied away from it. There's so much dialogue, like your character, for instance, so Moat, for anyone who's not seen it yet, Moat is his servant. And you and your servant are trying to figure out how you can pursue the love of Jaconetta. And the two of you, I mean, one of the things that's hard for a person reading the text the first time is that your character kind of loses his train of thought. And you and Moat go off on these tangents all the time. Could you talk just a little bit about getting to know that, like, and the struggle you might have had reading it and saying, like, what is up with this guy?
Yeah.
And then, because by the time you perform it, you just look like somebody who is talking about love, ordering his servant around, and sometimes going off on the tangents and losing his track. I mean, you play it perfectly naturally. Can you talk to me just a bit about that reading experience of because when you read someone go off a tangent, it doesn't make sense on the page. Can you talk about that experience of getting to know that character?
Yeah, you know what, going back to Moth, I think we had this Abbott and Costello kind of, you know, kind of back and forth thing that we went to look at, you know, and it's these big tangents. Me and Rick also discussed like the world that Don Amato builds himself in, right? Like his own little reality versus the reality that exists. And those tangents kind of come from, I kind of me too, right? I go on little tangents, and I know what it's like to just, you know, kind of disappear in my own world. So really seeing where things ladder and build, and, you know, what's the imagery, what am I seeing, and really trying to paint it out as brightly as I can, or as kind of dully as I can too, when he finds this, like, so, you know, sadness of like, oh, why do I feel I'm so in love? Why? so really trying to draw that out of myself was what helped in those tangents. And kind of thanks to Moth, it's funny because Moth is serving as a servant, but is so knowledgeable as a servant and so smart. So the feedback that I'm getting also helps from Yortana, who played Moth. But that dialogue helps me build the oh, that's right, I have to come back to what my goal is. What's my what the thing I got to get back to.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we talked a lot about what Armato's tasks were, you know, and treating, and you have to treat it always. I think you always have to treat it with the utmost high stakes and seriousness, even when it's, in this particular case, you know, there's a lot of quibbling, language quibbling, you know, and Armato is a foreigner in this world, and so this quibbling that you know that Armato's doing in the play. Christian and Yortana and I talked a lot about how that quibbling is him trying to really understand how to act and how to navigate his way in this world, which is not a natural world for him. And also there's a lot of finding ways to stand on his dignity when his dignity is being challenged. You know, and it's always funny to watch somebody in a sense, make a fool out of themselves by trying to be dignified. You know, I think that's one of the most wonderful ways that character comedy works. You know, the way that Charlie Chaplin works is that Charlie Chaplin's always trying to retain his dignity while falling on his face. You know, and the same thing is true our motto. He's always trying to find his way of being dignified, even when he's confronted with things that strip him of his dignity. Right, Christian?
Definitely. And Jeffrey, when you say you returned to it, as in you had looked back on it before, and can you explain that?
Well, no, I taught it about 8 years ago, and it went fine. And then I got into a pattern of teaching a group of plays, like about 6 or 7 plays a semester, and they all fit together so well. And then I started just a couple of years ago, saying, I need to go back and start broadening my group again. And so one of the things that I've been hesitant about Love, Slavers, Lost is the amount of historically specific jokes. And then, like with your character, you and Moth, there are like some moments where when somebody really gets it, that you're a character he's saying things in a ridiculous or stuffy or kind of like he's going off on the tangents. It's hard to follow that as a reader for the first, second, or third time.
But now you can just show them Christian's performance, and they won't be.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing that I really I like you've just made me think is that for an actor who's trying to learn to be Armado, that's what Armado is. Armado's trying to learn to be Armado. You know, he's trying to learn what it is to be a man in love with a woman, to really care about her as a person and not just the sign of she. You know, like there's this moment in the play, this line that we fell in love not with she, but the sign of she. You know, he's really trying to genuinely love, but he's never been genuine before.
And I just love that he goes goo for some plain Jane per se, right? Like Jack and Netta comes in and he's like, oh my God. It's so funny, and I really love that. So shout out to Jack and Netta too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whether she's really even interested in him, I'm just not quite so sure. But he decides to take on that role of being heroic and dignified with her.
And carry her plow.
Yeah, for 3 years.
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah.
And we changed it to 5. He's gonna this is gonna check. She says 5 years. No, 5 years, not 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
So I want to again just check back and see if there are any questions anybody has. I want to make sure that we're not overlooking.
We welcome all
anybody.
questions.
Got the king here, Richard.
Hey, what up, Armado? Our boys in the house.
Rose, what was it like for you? Rose was an understudy in this production. What was it like for you to watch this whole process? You know, as an actor in training, and see how this whole process went from beginning to end.
You know, at first, I'm not gonna lie, it was very confusing. I had no idea what was going on, and being on the other side of the screen and watching you guys in the space, I was so jealous. I was like, I want to be there. But you know, COVID, so that's a no. But watching it come together was, well, it was a process. So it felt like there were long chunks of time dedicated to introductions and then going into the scenes. So it just felt like a very specific process that was hard to understand at first. But then once we were reaching our ending goal, I really saw it come to fruition. And then we split off, and the understudies were just kind of like floating in this weird abyss, and the actors were recording. And then finally the play came out, and watching it was like, holy cow, this is the show. This is what came together. And it just, even though I wasn't in it as an actor, it just felt so worth it watching it, and worth the wait, because it was so different generally, and so different from all the other shows that I've seen online. And I just think it it was a beautiful product and a beautiful process.
Well said. Very well said.
Rose, could I just ask you? I mean, like you were an understudy for Rosalind, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, before you came on, we were talking with Richard about playing the Court of Navarre, and there is a kind of nobility. I mean, it is the king and three dukes. They are nobility, but I mean that is what's called for in Shakespeare's play, and that's what the actors played. They are nobles and believe themselves to be on top of things, but to a certain extent, the women's court, the princess and Rosalind and Mariah and Catherine, is that the other character? Catherine, yeah. They're more on top of it than the men are. Can you talk about that sense of your character Rosalind is such a wit. She's so in command of herself. Can you talk about some of the things that helped you to get into thinking about that character, that sense of her own nobility, her own command?
Yeah. When I think about a character, I kind of think more so psychologically, what makes the character, and why has this character gained these certain traits. So when I'm not a funny person, but for this character, is like, why is she funny? Why has she adapted this humor? And that's like the actor's secret for the character. Like, what would I be using to cover up with humor? So I think a lot of that was just appearances, basically.
So
I think it's upholding an appearance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think she's covering up? That she really likes Baroon or something else?
I think, yes. I think she does like him, but I also think she's covering up fear, this fear of it not being mutual or real, because in this situation, everything is so surface level. But she is seeking a real connection, and so she's afraid that her connection with Barone is just superficial. So that's where the humor comes in, to protect herself from getting hurt.
Would you say that wit in this play is often either a defense mechanism or a kind of a form of attack?
I think so.
Right. They do battle with each other, these men and women, and they use wit in order to do it. It has a very specific way of deflecting Barone's wit play, and there's a line that the king has: "Have at you then, affections, men and..." Oh no, it's Barone who says that. But then the king has a line right after Barone's speech where he says, "Unto the fray," or what's the line, Richard, where the king says?
He says, because Barone does his whole speech, and then the king says, "Oh my goodness, I'm I'm drawing a blank."
He says, St. Cupid then, and
St. Cupid then, and soldiers to the field.
Soldiers to the field, right? So there's this imagery all through the play where wit play, the cleverness of wit. Armato has this too. Wit is thought of as a kind of ammunition, a kind of something that can be used to conquer, and in the women's case, something that can be used to deflect the conquering of men, something in their arsenal, right? To either overcome or to keep at bay, and until at the end, I mean, you have this incredible thing that happens at the end, right, where Barone is told by Rosalind that his wit is being misplaced. His wit needs to be used to heal the sick, to make people laugh who are in need of laughter. And again, I thought, oh my God, you know, Karen Hoyer, our clown teacher who helped everybody with clowning in the play, she works for Ringling Brothers Clown Care Unit. And she said to me, Barone is the first clown care unit person working in a hospital. Rosaline tells him to go into a hospital and to help people laugh in a hospital. That's what your wit should be used for. That's what humor should be used for. It should be used to heal, right? And not to either seduce or to impress, not as a form of ego, but as a form of connection to other people and as a form of healing. And I thought, again, well, there's a connection to our current world where humor should be used as part of the healing process.
Yeah, I love those lines, like Barone, so the other characters are told that they will need to go to a hermitage and wait, but Barone, you know, she tells him that you're going to have to visit the speechless sick, and he says you're going to make me move wild laughter in the throat of death. And she says, yeah, that's what you're doing. You're going, so, like, you know, it kind of comes full circle at the end, where people had been using their wit either to mock other people or to avoid seeming like to avoid sincerity and avoid vulnerability. And the news that the princess's father has died suddenly just like snaps everyone into a seriousness, and that you need to get your emotional house into order, and you've got a year to do it. It's in
a sense saying, you know, grow up. Everybody needs to. Death enters the play in the form of Marcadee and says, right? Yes, life is too short. Death enters the play and says, everybody, what's most valuable, what's most meaningful to you? And again, you know, I think of all the things that we've been going through, and a lot of it is, you know, I know, having lots of wonderful one-on-one conversations with all of you students who are sitting here. We've all been thinking about what's most meaningful in our lives because of all of the things that have been happening. And the play does that. That's what the play does. The play for a long time can feel, in a way, just like a wonderful sort of comedy. And then you get the silly Russians coming in and all of that. And you get, people saying ridiculous things. And then at the end, all of a sudden, wow. That's another reason why it's a bit different from some of Shakespeare's other plays, right? The presence of death at the end, and the fact that it does not have a happy ending. It's a delayed happy ending. What does Barone say? You know, the king says it'll only be a year, and he says that's too short for a play. That's too long for a play.
Too long for a play. Yeah.
Too long for a play. Yeah.
Well, can I ask, I know you're getting close to the end of time, but there's a group of people that make this play work so well that are not, I don't think we've really gotten to talk about much, and it's the music. I mean, you guys are the UIC Department of Theater and Music. Right. The interludes in between the acts are beautifully played. There's some wonderful instrumentals of piano and of orchestral. There's also 2 songs. One I know of, 3 songs. Okay, one that I know of as an English folk song. I've seen it in a performance of Taming of the Shrew.
Cuckoo's Nest.
What's that?
Cuckoo's Nest.
Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, a scandalous, bawdy song. And then the second one is that I'm remembering is it's one of Shakespeare's sonnets.
Mhm.
Did you all acquire the music of this? Do you know who wrote this?
Yes,
Or-
yes. One of our faculty members in the School of Theater and Music, Amos Gillespie, wrote the music for this. Beautifully wrote the music for this. So this is a wonderful example of collaboration between the School of Theater and Music. Amos wrote the music and played it, and had some other people play some of the interludes. And yeah, there's also the song at the end of the play, which is the Owl and the Cuckoo song,
Yeah.
which ends the play, which kind of sums up the play in a way. And then Armado comes out and has the last line of the play, that wonderful last line. What's the last line of the play, Christian?
The words of Mercury are harsh after the songs of Apollo. Are you that way, we this way?
What does that mean? I mean, so beautiful. It's so beautiful, and that comes after the Owl and the Cuckoo song. But yes, I think Amos Gillespie did a beautiful job in writing that, writing the music for the play.
Yeah.
And
And your Tana and Freya, is that her name? Who's your costard? I mean, they're excellent. Their singing is beautiful. And Jaconetta, Casey, is that her name? Casey Quinn?
Mhm.
Just great. Just great.
Mhm.
Was that done essentially the same as everything else? Like, were they listening to the instrumental and then did they record it with cell phones and the same as everyone else?
They
Or-
recorded the songs, you know, in a studio setting, but then they lip synced it
Okay. Okay.
so that they could hear themselves sing it and get the lip syncing right. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah, which is why it works so well. I think, you know, they couldn't sing it. It wouldn't work so well with the iPhones.
yeah. Micing's always the problem, isn't it? Microphones. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much. I just want to give one more chance if anybody has any last thoughts about our UIC production of Love's Labor's Lost. I'm so happy that some of our actors joined us, and Tanara Marshall's here, our voice and speech teacher at UIC, who works with them on Shakespeare as well. And we've got Guillermo here. Any last thoughts from anyone before we wrap up today? What does "you that way, we this way" mean, Christian?
You gonna put me on the spot? You gonna make me?
Yeah, we never talked about it.
I think the best way I like to think of it is the world still continues and the actors now go back to their world as the audience goes back to theirs.
Perfect.
Back to their bubbles.
And that's
Back to their
and that's a great way to wrap things up. So thank you all so much for being here, and for I hope that if you haven't had a chance to see the UIC theater production of Love's Labor's Lost, I hope that you will see it. Oh, there's my daughter Emma, who's joined us. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Emma.
Yeah, there's my daughter. See, all these actors know you, Emma, because I talk about you all the time.
He does.
But so
Oh
there
no.
there she is. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion, and thank you all so much for your support of UIC Theater, School of Theater and Music, and for this production of Love's Labor's Lost. And Jeffrey, thank you so much again for your
Thanks a lot.
your wisdom.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
you.
Thank you all for being here
you.
and for supporting us.
Guillermo.
Appreciate it.